Hello everyone. I'm going to start with the stuff I usually say at the end to begin with because a lot of people have been adding my profile still. If you want a fortnightly invite to this, please make sure you add the version of me that has this avatar that I'm using now. A load of people have been subscribing to a profile that I don't use, and it's not helpful. Anyway, the first thing I wanted to start out with is that 2 weeks ago, obviously there was a debate on this show with nephilimfree, and I have got some feedback from that. But a lot of it was just basically calling me an idiot. So I was hoping that perhaps we could get some constructive feedback on this here. What do people think of the debate? Do people want to do debates on this show in the future? Do you think it was a good idea? Do you think it was reasonably successful? And then after that, we'll move on to the other issues about the magic sandwich show, that sort of thing. Fiona, do you want to start maybe because you were involved in the debate with nephilimfree? Do you think it was a good idea? I think you're muted.
Yeah, I mean they are a good idea. If they're like informal discussions, I think formal debates where you set aside your 5-minute opening, your maybe 10-minute main, your 10-minute rebuttal, all that. I mean, I think that's quite over the top. Informal discussions are an interesting way to go, especially if it's between two people or two groups of opposing positions. The only problem is that you have to really keep a lid on it because they can go belly up very easily. But they do make for interesting listening to because you get both sides. How's that?
I mean, the concern was about. I mean, this was something that came up on the Gman discussion in the Magic Sandwich show as well. The concern was about giving someone like a creationist a platform, and whether we should be doing that sort of thing, whether there's an ethical problem with it.
I actually think we have to. I mean, I don't know how old any of you are, but I certainly remember following the Rover trial. I mean, long before it even came to trial. And one of the problems that the scientific community had was that they had been ignoring ID. And so when this all came up in Dover, Pennsylvania, science had to play catch up because they had no idea how sophisticated the machinery was behind ID. And so they were almost caught with their trousers down because they had ignored it for so long. So I think we have to listen to what they are saying, given that there are calls for it to be introduced into schools. We need to know what science is up against.
I agree. I just had this conversation with Fabio last night for about an hour and a half or so, just one-on-one. And we talked about the Bill Nye debate, and it is of my opinion, recorded opinion on the Magic Sandwich show, that these things actually are necessary. You know, a lot of people say you shouldn't give them a platform, etc., but we don't have a choice. It's wishful thinking to think that this is going to go away without fighting it. Okay, sometimes you just don't have a choice. Yeah, about 50% of Americans believe in the literal creation. That's about 150 million or so people. It's not, you know, ignoring it, just saying, well, it's not scientific, so we're not going to address it. It's not going to go away that way. It's only going to grow. And at some point, you just have to be a realist and say, well, yeah, I'm giving them airtime, but you know what? They already have the airtime. They already have a huge segment of the population. It's not, you know, how much more damage can we do? Frankly, you know, I mean, the only damage we could really do is by losing debate after debate, but we're not doing that. So I think we need to, you know, give them enough rope to hang themselves in public debates, and what Nephi did last time 2 weeks ago was basically just that. I mean, it was clear he knew a whole lot of hot words and you know, jumbled them together, but he clearly had no idea what he was talking about.
He was just talking from a script. You could tell.
Yeah. So I think it's really just closing your eyes and engaging in wishful thinking by thinking, well, we shouldn't engage these people at all because it only validates their position. That's obviously not the answer. And you know what? The situation as it is today proves that point. If you want data, there is data. 50% of the population believes in a literal creation.
May I suggest that in terms of who needs whose platform and so on and so forth, the needs, generally go with the minority, right? The minority needs the platform more, and given that statistical evidence, it's around 50-50. Well, there's effectively at that totally neutral point, no concession in platform either way, and beyond that even. I expect actually further losses or worse, and we'll be the ones needing the platform. We'll be the ones needing them to have a platform, audience, etc. If they don't bring the platform, then they'll at least bring the audience following them, right?
Yeah, I agree. I just think, I think it's a moot point to say that we shouldn't engage in this stuff. It's just not working if that way, the way people want it to, I guess. So yeah. So I say have more, but don't give them a platform over and over again. I think that's a bad idea. That's all I got to add to it.
Well, if we wall off, right? Say nobody brings their audience with them to anybody else's show, and people who need to be persuaded at every stall, they stay in a hermetically sealed bubble, right? So, on the other hand, even if it's an even exchange, even if it's 50-50 and there's no, or we're in a majority or whatever, I mean, the only way to reach them is to basically have their audience follow them in while we're giving them a platform in exchange, right? That's the only way. That's how we bring, or that's how we carry out any outreach to them. Or, they invite us to try and smack us down, and then, well, of course, we get their audience, we get their platform, and I'm not sure we're too worried about losing our quote unquote followers, whatever. And I think once you've arrived at reason and so on, you're pretty much in good shape with regard to persuasion of things that are, well, unsound. Okay, go ahead.
I don't really have anything to add.
Well, I mean, if there are any detractors, then feel free to join, because I did get quite a lot of negative feedback. So I mean, if people do have that, then please come on. I guess one of the concerns is that when nephilimfree mirrored the video, he called it something like nephilimfree refutes Fiona at PhD in biology or something. As if he somehow has the ability to engage in a debate with someone that has a doctorate, which of course isn't true. But
yeah, but we knew that was going. I mean, did anyone here think that he was going to represent his position afterwards in an honest fashion? Was anyone under that delusion? If so, please wake up. Yeah. If so, please wake up. Please, have some coffee and wake up. I mean, when has Gman or Veckel or Jason Burns or nephilimfree or any of them ever conceded that they lost a single point or can't answer a single question? When have they actually ever said, I don't really know the answer to that? I can't think of a single time. Can you?
And I would also point out that it doesn't really matter what he says or what he calls his video when he mirrored it. The fact of the matter is that somebody took a clip and it's been shared all over Google. And it was his response to the thing about the RNA and the amino acids. And it showed him up for the ignoramus he was on the subject. That one little soundbite has ended up being shared all over Google. And so I don't think anybody is going to be fooled by what he calls his mirror of the hangout. Yes, there are going to be some diehards who think, oh yeah, didn't he do well? But I think that's really only fooling those who are probably unreachable.
Mm-hmm.
If you see what I mean, you know that just that one wee clip taken from the hangout, and shared by somebody, and then shared on and shared on and shared on. That one bit, I think, did more damage to any point that he was attempting to make in the whole hangout.
Mm-hmm.
Because having been corrected, he then stuck to his script with his error still in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes some way to destroying his credibility without resorting to name calling or insults or anything like that. I think it was Nadia that used the phrase, give them enough rope.
Mm-hmm. I used it.
Yeah, I knew it was somebody.
Yeah, it's okay.
And I can see the other side of the argument. Just don't give them the oxygen of publicity. But the problem is they have it anyway. They have their own channels, and they have their followings. They've already got that. Mm-hmm. And if we let their assertions stand unrefuted, and especially some of the pseudoscience, then I'm a bit uneasy about that, because I mean you'll all have seen, if you repeat something often enough and loud enough with nobody kicking up a fuss about it, mm-hmm. it becomes accepted fact. And then you really have got a lot of catch up to play.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we can ignore it. I think scientists have ignored it for far too long, and this is kind of the result. You need pushback. You need a pushback in society in general, saying, this is just ridiculous. Okay, but here's the thing. I mean, these guys aren't, William Lane Craig or anybody of that stature. They are really the worst of the worst. It seems to me that all the YouTube famous creationists in these circles, etc., are, I mean, they're just out there with every single, conspiracy theory and quackery you can imagine. I don't know of a conspiracy theory they don't buy into. So it's not like we're refuting, some famous Christian theologist who has some very interesting philosophical points to make and has actually, looked into science, etc. And it's still wrong on a fundamental level, maybe, but it's not like, a sane person we're refuting. So I think the more we expose these guys, the more insane they look. I think that's just going to do our work for us, in a sense.
It's sunlight, not oxygen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing we have to bear in mind is it isn't just to do with, well, the possible damage to science education should this get put into schools. But also the people who are buying into the pseudoscience are also the ones who are buying into things like anti-vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a huge impact on society,
Mm-hmm.
on the welfare of society, on my welfare and your welfare and everybody's welfare. So I think
Why?
I
Oh,
think
come on, using it.
I think there are a number of angles that can be affected by this. And so it's not just to do with the education, but to do with, because what they want to do is basically bin science and start again.
Mm-hmm.
They are rewriting science to suit, and they're doing it to suit their particular faith.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they are actually worldwide in a minority amongst people of the same faith. So I mean, it's got far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, I agree.
Not to mention they teach their kids that as well. Teach their kids creationism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we can't stop them from doing that, but hopefully we can influence others from not doing that. Eventually, I mean, I just think we're in it for the long haul. There's no magic bullet to this. This is a generational thing at this point. And you're not going to convince 150 million people. Plus, remember, it expands geometrically because they have kids, etc. Many of them have several. So, we have to just keep pressing on. It's not going to end, I think, in our lifetimes. Sad but true. But hey, that's life. Sometimes you just don't see the end of the battle. You just engage with it for as long as you can, and you let others pick up where you leave off.
But it's still, but at least it's getting better now. Atheists rising all over the world.
Yeah, we actually see, from all the data we see some actual gains in the last few years after the populism, etc., of atheism and non-believers, or just people accepting science and saying, well, this other stuff is just rubbish. You can't say that. You can still be a believer and you can still accept science. I mean, look at Ken Miller. He was instrumental in defeating Michael Behe on the trial at Dover. So, I don't think they could have done it without him, in fact. So I think we have made some gains.
I should point out that we are not topically constrained to the subject of a trial and can benefit from, say, a broader spectrum attack or a defense in depth and so on. I'd like to point out, say, for instance, an analysis as to why the next generation is leaving the faith. That's a rather different issue.
I think I agree, and I actually, that point has to be made. I think that part of the reason is because they see all these crazy people.
Yeah, and even with that as a maybe the most clearly identifiable or large block of those leaving the faith, it's only 31%, right? If you're going to push at all the points that actually are motivating people to depart, which there's a question of whether the departure outright is really the best goal, but at least in the sense of countering creationism, departure is one tactic.
I don't necessarily care if they leave the faith. I just care if they accept science. And if they leave their church, that's different than leaving the faith. And I accept that. That's fine as long as they accept science and don't push religion on other people. I don't care what they believe. In fact, if it makes them happy, if it makes them good people, fine, I can live with it. So yeah, I agree. But I've read actually some statistics that a lot of young kids in America have been leaving their faith because of the anti-gay stances, etc. And that's an important point. You know, many of the evangelicals and fundamentalists are not doing themselves any favors.
There's
And
more
also,
though.
Anyway,
Shockingly.
I think I'll take it from this that it's probably a good idea to do a few debates on here, but not to do it too often, and not to give the same person the platform over and over again.
Yeah, you know, you can call people back once or twice, etc. But don't make it like every week we have another creationist on here.
Okay. Well, I mean, since no one seems to be diametrically opposed to that, perhaps we should move on to the next thing. I mean, I don't know if anyone has anything left to say about the last Magic Sandwich show, which was, of course, the Gman and True empiricism thing. I didn't watch the after show, but of course I was in the main one, so I enjoyed the whole thing. But I don't know if anyone wants to make any comments on
Quantum, I just had to say that was very Christian of you.
I wanted to say how funny it was that DPR thought you'd never been on the show before.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to remember people by and large. He remembers me when it comes to the Middle East, but that's about it.
Yeah, Quantum had to explain that he'd been going on the show for about a year now.
I know. So we'll see. You know, DPR sometimes he misses a few things, I guess, or he doesn't remember them, I suppose. But yeah, I don't really have much to say about G-Man. I was on the after show, Fiona's after show, for about 45 minutes, and then I really had to go to sleep because it was like 3 in the morning or something for me. But yeah, I already said my piece on it several times.
Yeah.
I think what I said is what I needed to say in the after show. That I didn't think either had put up a brilliant performance. But they have been making video after video declaring victory ever since, which is to be expected, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, they're reacting the same way that Nephi did. It's no surprise.
I did react last time.
No, just butt in, Nodin. Just butt in.
Okay, I got 2 points. So, as a quick rewind to just before, on the movement to the liberal Christian front, there actually are statistics showing, you know, the movement between the denominations and such. Mm-hmm. But as a sort of concrete example, here is I gave a link to the World, I think, Water Forum or something like that, related climate action march by Episcopalians in New York. Second, someone who, well, didn't really follow the actual Magic Sandwich Show debate, but is, I guess, in what you might call regular contact with True empiricism and G-Man. I kind of felt that they avoid the subject, or maybe outside of well, the victory declarations in the videos, and I guess the way it seems like it is when maybe talking to True empiricism, you know, it seemed like there was some frustration and maybe I don't know, a bit of lacking connection, wanting to make more of a connection, and you know, I think it's very possible to do more outreach and, you know, bring him around, maybe if not all the way to something that's, you know, at least more sane somehow. And
well, he did actually comment afterwards, Nadia. That he made the conscious decision to go in very aggressively on R&R. That was a conscious decision he made before he even went into the room.
From what I've seen of G-Man, his power is kind of a lot like Ray Comfort in that he has tremendous ignorance, and he's able to ignore people's points or misunderstand people's points. So whenever you make a valid point against him, he can just go ahead and just not understand it and just argue against a straw man or something entirely different.
Do you have any examples of what you're talking about?
Here's,
I find that really irritating just to make blanket statements like that without giving examples. It's just one of my pet peeves. I'm just curious if you have an example.
Yeah, if you watch the last Magic Sandwich show, there's plenty of examples in there. I could go get some for you if you want.
No, I mean, for you to say something like that, I would think you'd have two or three examples of what you're talking about. It's just as a viewer, it's really irritating to hear people do that, to give these just blanket, unsupported assertions without some sort of backup. So just that's
the impression I came away with from watching the show.
Yeah, because I mean, this discussion is about that episode of the Magic Sandwich Show.
Well, that's why I was just asking for examples.
So that's where you'll find everything in that show itself.
What examples are we looking for? Sorry, I just missed the last few seconds. What examples of what?
Whatever he was talking about.
I was just saying that it's sometimes hard to get your point across to Gman, and he often misunderstands your point, even if you've made a valid argument.
Well, and then you accuse him of ignoring the point and then bringing up straw man and then arguing against that.
I'll give you a perfect example. When it came to measurement, he refused to understand what exactly measurement is about, and tolerance and margins of error. These are fundamental things in science that he refuses to understand or display any interest in. So that is a huge example of his deliberate ignorance. And when he was brought to the water and asked to drink, he refuses to drink. That is the perfect example for me.
Yeah, and
sorry, go on, Fiona.
That led him to be backed into a corner where he then had to say that the speedometer on your car, when it indicates speed, isn't measuring speed, it's an educated guess.
Yes.
That a speedometer makes an educated guess, because he wouldn't grasp this idea of measuring things. He refused point blank. He wanted to say that everything was an educated guess.
I think it's deliberate. I think it's absolutely deliberate, because he understands exactly what happens in the argument if he accepts the scientific definition and the scientific understanding of how to measure things and how to calculate tolerance and how to calculate margins of error. And if he accepts that, then his argument would have flown out the window, and he didn't want to do that.
Yeah. So he was just
they'll never say they're wrong, ever. It doesn't matter. They'll lie through their teeth about not understanding something, simply just not to lose that argument.
What's that mean, calculate tolerance? What are you referring to? How do you calculate?
Well, so this was the point I brought up about measurements and whether it's something to guess. When you have a physical quantity, a numerical quantity, it could be speed, it could be time, it could be electromagnetic field strength, it could be anything. There's always a certain uncertainty associated with that quantity, and the uncertainty is statistical, and it takes into account how confident you are in the measurement and the measurement apparatus, that sort of thing. There's actually even an uncertainty in the uncertainty, but people don't usually quote that because it's sort of second order. But the fact is that just because a measurement has an associated uncertainty doesn't mean that it's a guess or anything, or the fact that we're not 100% sure that the Earth is 4.54 billion years, and there's a 33% chance that it's more than 0.05 billion years out, should not be a cause for alarm, because this is exactly the status quo. This is exactly how statistics works. Just by chance, it could be out.
Well, they've been changing the age of the universe since the beginning of science. It's gone from a few millions of years old to kind of stair-stepping upwards ever since the 1700s, really.
Well, because our understanding of
Well, of course,
eight.
models have improved over time. So you would expect it to change as we understand more about it. And of course, even with the Big Bang theory, the uncertainty in the age of the universe has decreased, and you would expect, as time goes by, for the uncertainty for it to decrease. It's happened, for instance, in the measurement of the speed of light, where we have more sophisticated measurements to measure the speed of light. So the uncertainty in the speed of light has perhaps gone from 1 times 10 to the 7 meters per second to less than 1 times 10 to the 3 meters per second, something like that. And you fine structure constant. That's another example.
Yeah. Could I just say here that I think what we're trying to, Tommy asked for an example of what we're talking about, and we mentioned tolerances. Did you get what was said to you about tolerances, Tommy?
Well, that's what I was asking, because he was just...
So you still, right, okay. Now you're a landscape gardener, aren't you?
Yes.
Right, okay. So if you're landscaping somebody's garden, and you're going to buy in, say, pea shingle, and you need so many bags of pea shingle, and there's a ton in a bag, you know yourself that when you get the bag, it's not exactly a ton. It could be a little bit either way.
Right.
And the tolerances that we're talking about are what would be allowable on the plus and minus before you either think that you've been given short measure or been oversold. You see what I mean? And that would come down to how whatever piece of machinery they were using to weigh those bags. So if it was a very rough measuring machine, your tolerances would be a little bit bigger, because you know it's got a bigger margin of error. And if it's a very sensitive machine, then your tolerances should be really quite small, because you wouldn't expect big differences on the plus or the minus side. So that's the tolerances that we're talking about.
So you can have biases of the operator too. You know, someone could be.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about. So when we were explaining to Gman about measuring things, and saying that you know you give the measure plus or minus a certain quantity, because that's the tolerance of the measuring apparatus. And he was saying that as soon as you put a tolerance on it, it's no longer a measurement, it's an educated guess. But I'm sure that if you were buying in all this pea shingle, you wouldn't be expecting somebody to deliver the pea shingle with an educated guess of a ton in a bag. So even although it isn't buying on a ton, they haven't just guessed, it has been measured.
Yeah, but some things you can agree are able to be measured a lot more precisely than others. I mean, there's a lot of things about life that aren't, you know, you're not able to quantize them as easily.
Yeah, but that's not the point that was being made. The point that was being made was that he was insistent that unless you had a single specific figure without these tolerances, then it was no longer a measurement, it was an educated guess. And that then led him into the argument that a speedometer, because a speedometer gives you the speed of the vehicle plus or minus maybe 2 miles an hour, that's about how much it's out either way. That led him to say that a speedometer doesn't measure speed. The speedometer makes an educated guess. Now, I don't know about you, but if I thought my speedometer was making an educated guess, I wouldn't be driving my car anywhere.
Well, I can say, if you're going at a full speed, you know, 60, 70 miles an hour, and you put your brake on real quick, is the actual speedometer arm as it goes down going to be accurately reflective of what your actual speed is if you're braking at a high rate?
No.
It's not guessing though. It's not guessing it.
Yeah, but Gman's point was worse than that. Gman's point was that since the speedometer says, let's say, 35 miles an hour, and it's plus or minus 1 mile an hour, well, then, you know, he didn't know if maybe it was 5 miles an hour, maybe it was 10 miles an hour, maybe it was 70 miles an hour, because it's just an educated guess. Well, I'll tell you something. There's no way that you're going 70 miles an hour if your speedometer is saying 35 miles an hour and is working correctly. Okay? There's no way. And you know, you're not going 5 miles an hour either. And for you to say that, well, I just don't know, maybe I'm going 5 miles an hour, is pure idiocy. It means he didn't want to accept the definitions that were presented to him.
Yeah.
I just want to say Nadia's been waiting for a while.
Yes, she has. Sorry,
Did you
Nadia.
want to make a point, Nadia?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I think there's a real opportunity to reach out to true empiricism, because he described his view of the comment thread he was interacting with as essentially like a difficulty in communication, where he felt that there was substantial agreement on the facts, but ultimately kind of I don't know, something about the interpretation and conclusions. And if you're that close, I think there's some common ground to make some progress. Okay.
I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, especially due to the fact that he's a bit of an ID proponent, and he usually makes that the false analogy of DNA being literally a computer program. And see, that's the problem when he was actually pressed for actual citations of this. It seemed to be a bit troublesome for him to actually provide empirical evidence that this statement was actually valid, as opposed to organisms developing complexity by evolutionary biological processes in contrast. But I mean, that was the problem with regard to the entire discussion, the fact that he had a burden that he did not meet, and he failed due to the consensus of everyone on that board.
I do think that True scuppered himself in coming in with that the aggressive way that he had chosen to come in. As I say, it was a conscious choice. To come into a discussion very aggressively, it doesn't make for a good conversation, and doesn't make for a good exchange of ideas. The thing is, you don't win discussions, but he was out to win, and yet there was nothing to be won. It was a discussion. I think maybe that's got a lot to do with what went down on the Magic Sandwich show. For the bit that True Empiricism was engaged in, because right from the word go, the aggression level was high, and that was a conscious choice that he made to do that, according to the comments he's been posting since. And I mean, does anybody think that going into a discussion in that manner is productive?
I don't think he wanted to be productive. He wanted to confront Aaron about things, and apparently has been wanting it for a while. So
yeah,
there's some element of self-publicity here, isn't there? I mean, Aaron was quite a popular figure, so I mean, I think there is some sort of self-fulfilling motivation in wanting to debate Aaron rather than just someone else. I mean, he came in one. Did he? Was this Gman or was it? I can't remember. But someone came in wanting a one-to-one debate with Aaron Ra, and I think he has a role.
It was Ronnie, just to help you out. And the problem is, you're exactly right. And also to agree with you on it, because you don't come into a discussion just to preach dogma, because that's what he was trying to do, rather than try to make clear points and provide the empirical basis for why you think that. I mean, if you just come in trying to be aggressive and just preach dogma at people in an authoritarian way, then of course that's not going to be very productive in any way.
Well, I think in some ways, like, I don't know, they change when they get in front of the camera, or feel like they have, well, it's like they're gaining a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe when it's kind of, you know, they feel like there's less at stake, they can be easier to reach. You know, so, you know, maybe somewhere where, you know, the setting doesn't work them up like that. It could open up the opportunity to, you know, pass on, you know, the correct information.
Mhm.
I might be going over old ground here because I didn't watch the after show. It was late, but sequential specified information. No, on Google Scholar, no results. Just normal Google, no results. I mean, well, what's up with this?
Yeah, I've been Googling like mad for this, with and without quotes, because he says it's sequential specified information. If you do the Google without quotes, I think it doesn't realise that the hits you get are those sites which have those three words anywhere. They don't need to be side by side. And the first hit he got was the wiki page on the central dogma of molecular biology. Now, he obviously didn't read the article, because nowhere does it say in there DNA is sequential specified information. The word sequential appears, the word specifies appears, and the word information appears, but not together. And the central dogma is said to be that it goes from DNA to RNA to protein. That's the sequence that's being talked about, the sequence of events, not the sequence in the DNA. And on top of that, the phrase was coined by Crick, who admitted later that he'd actually used the word dogma when he shouldn't have, because that's not what he actually meant. He'd misused the word. And also, we know that not everything does go DNA to RNA to protein, because we have viruses that go RNA to RNA to protein, or RNA to DNA to RNA to protein. We have prions that just go protein to protein. So there isn't this central dogma, and that's what the wiki article tries to explain. And so it says nothing about DNA being sequential specified information. And none of his other hits say anything about DNA being sequential specified information. And in fact, if you parse that phrase and you actually home in on the word specified, if something is specified, then something else had to specify it. So the phrase, all it is saying is that DNA is designed. And so he's using the phrase that DNA is sequential specified information, therefore it's designed. But when you look at it closely, he's saying that DNA is sequential designed information, therefore it's designed. Because this is the problem. If something is specified, there must be something to do with specifying. And what DNA is actually doing is it is doing the specifying when it comes to amino acid sequence. The code along the DNA specifies the amino acids.
Yeah, so DNA is under regulation. So DNA can be, expressed in certain ways so that the proteins.
Yeah.
So I think that's the direction that's. Okay.
That's not really what we're talking about, Tommy. We're talking about the argument that was being made about sequential specified information. And that's the problem, because you can't say that DNA is designed, therefore it's designed. You can't say DNA is designed and it's designed. Yeah, it just goes round in a circle.
I mean,
Exactly.
what I thought he was talking about was something actually intrinsic to the DNA. I mean, couldn't you just have some DNA in an isolated environment, and then this whole thing that you've been talking about makes no sense in that context. So, is true empiricism completely confusing these two different ideas?
Yes, the term that's usually used in intelligent design circles is complex specified information, with that word specified meaning there must be a specifier, as in with design there must be a designer. If it's specified, there must be a specifier. And there's actually a formula for calculating complex specified information, and the words in that are actually quite important because it is normally abbreviated to CSI. So you can't just change it to sequential specified information and be talking about the same thing. There are even pages on the internet where you will find that the CSI of various proteins have been calculated. The formula is a load of nonsense, however, but somebody has actually calculated the number. I think Nadia knows something about this.
Yeah, I pretty much went the Dembski angle kind of from the get-go. I missed what Fiona found on the I guess chain of different synthesizations or whatever you want to call it, or transcriptions rather. But I mean, I examined that. There were some critiques of, I guess, prior attempts at Dembski to quantify the CSI and so on. He's changed. He used to have a definition essentially in terms of like naked entropy, right? Negative logarithm of the probability. But now he's working with a much more complex thing in terms of Kolmogorov complexity, and well, that actually makes it a lot harder to calculate, and in some ways raises some, well, opens it up to a lot of critiques that, well, need to be made, but I don't see any current critiques or any critiques of sort of the latest spin of it, even though it dates back to like 2005. And I've actually spent like about an hour, maybe two, with True Empiricism this morning, asking him about it. And it doesn't seem he ties his ideas very close to Dembski's work. So even though, I mean, there's, I guess, clear relationship in terms of, both party ID movement, both pursuing similar kinds of arguments regarding DNA. I don't think he's using the quantitative arguments from Dembski, and I hope to check in with him a little bit later today to get more of his ideas about this, and well, basically, just understand what he's talking about and see if we can actually develop a response to it or analysis of it. Okay. I might also try to
hearing about that.
Yeah, I might also take a stab at Dembski's information itself, though. That's kind of a
yeah, I'd like to see your take on that.
Yeah.
You've certainly got a skill set that I don't have when it comes to information. I think you and I would have to have a 3-week hangout for you to explain quite a lot of this to me.
I don't think it'd be that bad, but I mean, some of it refers to some.
I'm slow.
Yeah. Well, some of it refers to like computing ideas, like Kolmogorov complexity. That I need a little bit of groundwork to get far enough along to be able to digest it and so on. Okay.
Computers, plug it in, switch it on, it goes. That's the limit of my knowledge. I mean, that is it, Nadia. But yeah, if you do have further discussion, if you can get back to me. So I really would like to understand what it is that he's trying to say. and I don't think it's what he's saying at the moment. If you see what I mean, there's a confusion there somewhere.
But I mean, isn't one major problem with this that whenever creationists talk about information, they never define what they mean by information. I mean, so I have a limited knowledge on this as well, but I know that you can define information in terms of entropy. And I think on the Magic Sandwich show, Sam was talking a little bit about Shannon entropy, but entropy itself is a bloody difficult concept to understand, and it does have a mathematical definition. But I mean, these creationists don't really understand the maths behind it at all, do they? So they just have some vague qualitative concept.
Well, it looks pretty clear Dembski does, but in any event, well, I guess some of the YouTube people may not, or well, actually probably not, but still, I think what we end up with is a situation where if I mean, like, information in terms of a physical system is actually even different from what you end up with in the computer. I mean, there are a wide variety of notions. I mean, you don't just have Shannon entropy, you have Boltzmann entropy, which I think you might be familiar with from physics, right? And, you know, Kolmogorov complexity itself isn't, you know, like an algorithmic complexity or anything like that. It's actually just another another sort of entropy, right? For whatever kind of historical baggage reasons, you know, they use the word complexity even though it's really another form of entropy, right? So, yeah.
But anyway, does anyone else want to comment on this? Or if no one had anything left to say, we could move on. But I don't know, Tommy, did you have any problems with any of this stuff?
No, this is not my topic. So all I can pretty much do is just listen.
Yeah,
I wish I could.
Yeah, honestly, I just have one more thing to add with this. Whenever they use the term like information or something like that, it's sort of like when Ray Comfort talks about like how 747 can't explode and spontaneously form something complex like that plane. It has to be designed and stuff like that. But you know, when we're talking about things that occur, for example, in nature, say something as complex as like, for example, it starts off with let's see, with simple interactions like this little game of life here thing, but given time and variation, it could like branch out, diverge, and produce complex structures. So what he's really stating is that with this whole irreducible, well, complex specified information argument is that it's so complex that it must be designed when in fact there's no mechanism to actually detect that, and it's just really intuition as opposed to what we can actually observe within the real world. In an emergent universe, of course. That's what I have to say.
Okay, so are we done with this topic then? We can come back to it later if anyone has any additional points. But if we're done with analysing the Magic Sandwich show, then perhaps we could talk about Ebola, because that's a current affair, and I know Fiona wants to talk about that.
It's a scam.
It's a conspiracy.
Is anyone actually saying that it's a conspiracy?
I've actually seen a web shop. I can't remember if it was. I think Alan. I can't remember. Somebody on G+ posted a screenshot of a website, a Christian website, with a picture of Obama looking through a microscope, and it claimed that Obama had designed that liberals had designed Ebola to infect Christians. I'm not kidding. It was posted a few days ago, but yeah. So I have seen the conspiracy about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also read that it's actually the Red Cross who are actually injecting people with the ailment over there. The people who are trying to help with the Ebola are the ones making people sick.
Yeah. I think the caption was Obama looks through a microscope to see the new implementation of Ebola, to infect Christians or something crazy like that. I
The
mean,
Africans themselves are very leery of American scientists, so they've got their own quote-unquote conspiracy theory. And in fact, some of them are scared to death to even go to the Americans over there because they're convinced that their society was basically clear and free of this disease until the American scientists started jabbing them. And a lot of that stems from the whole Bill Gates Foundation that has an actual operation over there in Sierra Leone or whatever it's called, but in West Africa, and that's where the that's where the epicenter is of this outbreak. So there's a lot of things that are pointing to maybe some truth to that. And obviously Bill Gates has a motivation to make money. He's also in on the whole the thing about the vaccinations and is in a good position to make money off of those.
Wait, Tommy, are you saying that you actually think that we're infecting people deliberately with Ebola?
I think there's a certain number of people in society, especially leftists, who are scared to death of population growth. And
wait, no, you're not answering my question. I asked you a direct question. Are you saying that you believe that we're infecting people deliberately with Ebola?
I don't know that I would say that I would go that far, but I would say what our scientific community and political community is doing or not doing is what they would do if they actually wanted it to spread, aka leaving the border, leaving the flights open.
Well, can I just bring in a point here, because I do actually have a problem with this. If we're talking about the most efficient form of biological warfare or something, then it wouldn't be Ebola. I mean, Ebola is first of all, you can only spread it by direct contact. So why would you have Ebola as opposed to maybe some form of influenza, an airborne?
Smallpox is much better if you want to use it as a biological weapon. Yeah, much better virus.
That's an important assertion, first of all. You don't know exactly how it spread because this doctor who just came to New York obviously was probably wearing protective material and still got the disease anyway.
I know, but the point
May I point something out here, please? I'll tell you how he got infected, Tommy.
Okay.
Because when an Ebola patient is in the final stages of disease, basically their insides liquefy.
Right.
Now that means that they have projectile vomiting. Mm-hmm. That can go right across a room. They have explosive diarrhea. That can go right across a room.
But and these people surely have protective
May I finish, please? May I finish?
Sure, sorry.
Now, these health workers are working closely with that patient, and the outside of their protective gear is getting splattered in these liquids. The viral load in these liquids is very high at that stage in the disease. So the outside of their protective clothing gets contaminated. It's fine though, because they're inside the protective clothing. The difficulty comes in taking the protective clothing off, because you've got to get yourself on the outside of the protective clothing, and the protective clothing is contaminated. So you'll then be outside of the protection. That's the high risk part of the disease, getting out of the protective clothing.
I understand, but you could be on a plane and they could throw up or sneeze on you and be, they could infect the whole plane's load or people the same way.
But Tommy, the problem I have is, I mean, what Fiona says is correct, but even if it wasn't, which it is, that you still have to concede there are things that we have that are far more infectious than Ebola. I mean, like smallpox. So why would Ebola be the pathogen of choice if one wanted to reduce population or something?
It may be one that they've experimented on and have actually come up with some sort of a drug or some sort of vaccine that does work that they're not letting out. Something that they could control in the case of a widespread emergency. So who knows? I'm not taking that position. I'm not taking that position just to repeat that. I'm not taking the position they're doing on purpose. I'm just saying they seem like they're being very laissez-faire about this, and they're letting. It's almost like they're letting it, go out of control if that's what it wants to do.
Do you know what's happened in your country, Tony? Do you know what's happened in your country? There is a federal agency, CDC.
Yes.
But there are certain states, for example, Texas, who are really big on this. We don't want federal interference. And for that reason, the CDC can only issue guidelines. They cannot impose these control measures on any hospital or on any state, because certain states really don't want federal involvement. They want to keep their health as autonomous. And so the CDC can issue guidelines but cannot enforce them. The CDC has no teeth. They had no powers to tell that hospital in Dallas, no, you cannot try and treat this patient. He must be moved to a proper containment facility. They could recommend it, but they couldn't enforce it. And decisions were made that, with hindsight, we can all see were really stupid. Mm-hmm. Those decisions, however, were made by the hospital. They weren't made by the CDC, a federal agency. Neither were they made by the government. They were made by a private hospital, and they were made by the management of the private hospital.
But that's going to be the same issue all throughout the country. If we have people coming into this country from Africa, spreading all out, you know, there's all kinds of hick hospitals around that could have the same problem. And people, sure enough, you might be able to place blame on them, but that's not going to make it any safer for the country.
That is why the guidelines have been changed, that people have to be transferred to a proper facility. And that is now going to be enforced. But prior to that, the CDC's hands were tied.
Well, I can tell you, I listen to talk radio down here, and we have nurses calling in from that hospital. And I can promise you these nurses are screaming, or were, at the top of their lungs about not being equipped with the right protective material, not having the correct guidelines and support from the CDC on what exactly to do, what the protocol was. So there was actually a lot of questions about it, and they made some dumb mistakes. Sure enough, I agree with you. But
no, I'm not saying nurses made mistakes. But what I'm saying is the equipment that is available to the nurses in that hospital is down to that hospital. The CDC does not equip every hospital in the country.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just saying they weren't equipped.
To the hospital itself.
I'm just saying to put all the blame on the individuals breaking protocol.
No, I'm not doing that.
They're from Texas and they are rebels or renegades. That's not really fair.
No, I'm not doing that, Tommy. I'm just trying to explain to you why a federal agency could not impose measures on that hospital.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of the disease, you're talking about a lot of virus in liquid form all over the patient, all over the bed, all over the floor. Mm-hmm. And it's up to the employer, as in the hospital, to make sure that their employees are suitably protected. In other words, that the equipment that they require is there. If they don't have the proper gear, that is down to the hospital.
Wouldn't it be just easier to deny all passports from Liberia?
No.
Or all passports from Western Africa until this thing goes down? That's what I think most of the people on my side of the aisle are screaming. That instead of all this stuff about protocols and where to put the patients and all this stuff, it's easier and better and safer for the country just to deny all passports from Liberia and Western Africa.
Well, that's not going to help if it's already in the country, is it?
Your country did it.
Yeah.
It can kind of go anywhere.
But what I'm saying is that it's not going to help if it's already in.
That's
You're
true.
going to have these protocols. You can't just say, let's throw away the protocols and the guidelines.
Not true. I'm just saying, no. I'm saying, but this would be another weapon of keeping this disease at bay and away from us. Sure enough, it hasn't really started yet at all, but once it gets here, there's no turning back.
Yeah, the other problem is that the returning aid workers who are not on a Liberian passport. That doctor that's come into New York, was he travelling on a Liberian passport?
No, but they should. I think everybody coming from that infected area should be under, quarantine, mandatory quarantine.
I would actually agree with that. I would agree with that.
There isn't a good opening, but these are pretty open and shut points. So the first one is there's a guy down corner. I don't know. I think Fiona might have run into him once or twice or dropped into one of the hangouts. He ran a series of Ebola hangouts, and if I recall properly, they kind of got swamped by conspiracy theorists, and I'm not sure Down's entirely sane himself. Okay, next one is there actually are people who do advocate for population reduction, and the methods they suggest and their ability to act on their ideas are not quite what Tommy might fear. I can point you to them if you care to have discussions with them, and well, they might not scare you as much after. And last but not least, Daniel, I believe Right Wing Watch has a link to a real-world story vaguely resembling what you're pointing to from Christwire.
Yeah, no, I realize it's a parody site, but it was kind of funny.
Well, check Right Wing Watch. It's not a parody site.
No, I know. I'm subscribed to them since a long, long time. Yeah, I know. But I have seen other conspiracy theories out there. So yeah, it is out there. It's being talked about.
I mean,
yes, Benna. They're the anti-list. Go ahead.
But I was just going to point out that if someone wants to do this for financial gain, it seems to really be tempting fate here, doesn't it? To potentially risk an epidemic just for the financial gain.
Yeah, what does this have to do with Bill Gates? I'm curious.
Well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't necessarily think I'm totally on board with this, but he does have a setup office or building or something in Sierra Leone, and this is where they work on vaccines and drugs and things, all kinds of these transmittable diseases they kind of work on, and a lot of these people, Alex Jones, are really on board with the idea that this was purposely started and spread in Africa, and that they're waiting. That's why they say that Obama and crowd are not stopping the flights from Africa, because the Africans, they don't have the money to, they don't have, each individual person is poor, and so they want this thing to come to the United States so that all the people who have money in America will be so desperate and fighting for a vaccine that they'll pay top dollar for this thing. And so
right,
Bill Gates,
that's a really realistic scenario.
No.
I mean, but why cut out the middleman? Why don't you just start it in the US? I mean, if that theory is true, then I don't understand why you have to start it.
I think the thing is these people, a lot of them live out in the sticks, and so they don't have access to the internet and all that. They're just, they're there alone basically, and they're not educated. And if someone comes up to them that looks like they're in a position of authority or of intelligence, and they say, "Oh, here's some medicine," they're a pretty good prospect for infecting without having possible ramifications of them running to some authorities. That's pretty far removed from the United States, and it may be some sort of a situation where they're experimenting out there. I do find it odd that every time some of these terrible diseases pop up, it's in Africa. I mean, why is that?
Yeah, just to comment on the whole argument for travel bans. I mean, I think what we tend to forget is that Africa is a continent, one of the largest, in fact, and that since West Africa is a small section of it that's infected, it doesn't mean that all of Africa is infected. So shutting down flights from Africa due to Ebola being in parts of West Africa would be like shutting down flights in Europe because some rural Hungarians have measles. It's completely nonsensical.
No, nobody said stop all flights from all of Africa. We're talking about the 3 main countries that are infected.
But I mean, to answer your question, the reason that they turn up in places like Africa is because of mostly because of the political situation and how bad the healthcare is. I mean, I think I think that the 3 countries that are affected, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, one of them isn't even rated, but the other 2, I'm pretty sure are in the worst 20 countries in the world. One of them is probably even in the worst 5, in terms of healthcare by various different metrics. So I mean, and it's also, of course, the religious aspect. You have these religious traditions that aid the spread of this virus, like washing the dead bodies, that sort of thing. And of course, you also have the people that do actually believe that it is a conspiracy, that it is black magic or whatever, and are justifiably, well, maybe justifiably scared about this sort of thing. So again, they help the disease spread. I mean, incidentally, there is actually a second outbreak. There isn't just one outbreak of Ebola. There's actually 2. The other one is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but it's a completely separate incident. But there are actually two Ebola outbreaks going on at the moment.
Can I read you a quote from Bill Gates? He says, "The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. So he said, now if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, that we can lower that by 10 or 15%. So there's 2 things here. A, he's obviously very concerned about world population, which verifies what I said a second ago. And B, what's he including vaccines in there for? What does he know about what he can inject people with that's going to stop reproduction?
But and you're not a conspiracy theorist?
It's not about stopping reproduction.
It's about
just like 911 truthers.
What tends to happen in more affluent countries, the number of offspring that people have tends to decrease. I mean, in some parts of Europe, populations are actually declining. And the reason for that is partly education about contraceptives, that sort of thing, and sometimes it can be about the idea about having a child in somewhere like Africa can be a useful tool in like workforces, that sort of thing. But it tends to be that when you have a more affluent country, a more stable political structure, that what tends to happen is you're less likely to have more children because of the idea about contraceptions, healthcare, that sort of thing.
Does anybody have any defense for this comment though, that new vaccines could reduce reproduction?
Yes, I do have.
What's the context?
Okay.
I actually do have.
Okay.
What happens in poorer countries like this is that once you get older, you have to rely on your children to look after you. So where there are high death rates from disease, people tend to have lots of children to ensure that enough get to adulthood to be able to look after the elderly parents. If you're able to reduce the childhood mortality by vaccination, then they don't have to have as many children in an attempt to be sure that at least one will reach adulthood. That's why vaccines can actually assist in bringing population numbers down, because it reduces the number of offspring that people in countries like Africa feel they need to have to ensure that they'll be looked after when they can no longer.
But don't you think that information should be told to them before they're injected? I mean, don't you think people here would like to know before they get a flu shot or a vaccine in their kids that it might affect their reproductive capabilities?
It's
not going to.
That's not what I said.
No, you're confusing it's not. There's no direct relationship between having the vaccine and your reproductive ability. There's an indirect relationship, because people that are more affluent and have lower infant mortality rates also tend to have fewer children. There's no direct. It's not as if you have the vaccine and then you're biologically less likely to be able to reproduce. There's no correlation there. In fact, it's probably the other way. But it's
a conscious decision. If the childhood mortality rate is lower, then people don't have to have as many children to ensure that one survives to adulthood.
And you think they really think that's cultural change?
Let me finish, please. That's the point. This is why in places like Africa people have a big family, because so many of those children are going to die from diseases. So a conscious decision is made by the parents to have big families. Now, if you reduce the childhood mortality, then they're going to make the conscious decision not to have such a big family. And one of the reasons for that is because the bigger the family, the more poverty you're in. So they want to have the smallest family possible, but still ensure that at least one survives to look after them in their old age. So if you reduce the number of children that are going to die, there's no need for the couple to have as many children. They make a conscious decision to have a smaller family. So there's nothing about a vaccine reducing fertility. I don't know where you've got that idea from. I'm talking about couples will see that there is not a necessity for a huge family because they're not going to be losing so many children to disease.
I would dare say there's 0% of the couples in Africa who even consider vaccines when it comes to determining how many kids they do or don't have. I mean, if they have kids that...
No.
Again, I didn't see they did, Tommy.
Okay.
Well, no, it's.
I understand what you're saying.
How many children they are going to be available to look after them in their old age?
I would say they're going to have as many kids as they want to have. And regardless of how many die, they're going to probably have more if they want to have more. It's just, it really has nothing to do with the vaccine.
No, it's a vaccine is countries that have good vaccines tend to have lower infant mortality. This is just one particular aspect of the whole wealthier countries have fewer children type thing. It's just that if you increase the number of vaccines, you're going to lower infant mortality. You're going to improve the country's health development index on a general level. You're going to therefore improve the country's affluence on a general level. The country is as an entity is going to become a more viable entity in terms.
But that's not what he's saying. He's not saying that. I mean, by that logic, then more people would live. But what Gates is saying is he's looking to reduce population by 10–15% with vaccines.
No, but it's not. But the population would decline. I mean, it's not going to decline. It's just the rate of increase.
It makes no sense. No, it makes no sense. You're describing exactly backwards from reality.
No.
If less kids die from vaccines, then that would cause a population explosion, which would be the opposite effect of what he's talking about.
You can't just take into account this one variable. Okay.
It's so obvious.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yes.
No, it's not. I mean, you're saying that the only thing that influences population is infant mortality, but there's a knock-on effect. Lower infant mortality affects other things, and that has a knock-on effect and affects other things, and then that actually, ironically, reduces the population. So it's sort of like a negative feedback. It's not as simple as saying. It's not as simple as saying. Less people dying equals more population.
Well, help me out here. Okay, hang on. Help me understand this. So if we give all these Africans more vaccines, and these vaccines just theoretically help more babies survive into adulthood, how is that going to? And you're doing this all over the country. How is that going to reduce population?
Well,
please tell me.
It's over time the culture changes. There's also with education
It's a long-term project. It's a long-term project. I know you're going to reduce. Don't think in years and years, but yes, it's a long-term project. It's a generational outlook. You're not talking about 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You're talking about generations from now. As in, in the 19th century, most people in America were having far bigger families than they are today.
So over decades or generations, if I put more and more money in a bank, does that mean eventually that there's going to be less money?
Again, you're being deliberately obtuse, Tommy.
No,
you're
I'm not.
Deliberately obtuse.
No, I'm not.
I don't know how you can't understand what we're saying. Over time, it will change the culture so that people will feel less and less need to have more children simply to survive. That's all we're saying. Okay, it's a long-term process because as we've demonstrated in Western societies, the longer your longevity is, the less you need to rely on your children over time, because we used to have big families too. Okay, we used to have families, 10, 15 kids too. But because of medicine, because of modern medicine, and because of education, we changed that need. You no longer have
what happened is you've got the
15 kids to
government.
survive.
You have the government giving old people money. That's the difference.
No,
You
there we go.
don't need the kids to support the grandparents.
I can't argue with that kind of argument.
Please, may I try and explain this? Right.
Gavel, gavel, gavel.
Bobby, in these really poor countries, and I know I've said it before, but I'm saying it again, in these really poor countries, right, imagine you have an infant mortality of 75%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 3 children out of every 4 are going to die.
That's not realistic, but go ahead. That's not realistic.
How many children would a couple have to have in order to be sure that there was one child that would grow up to adulthood that would be able to care for the parents in their old age?
Sure, they would have to have more.
How many?
On average, I don't know. I don't know. 4.
The answer
3, 4
is
more?
4, Tommy.
Okay.
The answer is 4. That's why I picked 75%. Now, if the infant mortality was 50%, then to ensure that one child survived, they would have to have only 2 children.
But when it all shakes out, you're going to have the same number. As soon as all those kids die, you're still going to have the same number. They just needed more kids in the meantime.
Because what happens is when you reduce these diseases that are killing children, the society notices that. And so they end up having fewer children because they don't have to have such a large number to ensure that there are going to be children alive to look after them in their old age. You see, this is the problem. Without social care of any sort in these countries, elderly people are on their own. And the only way that they're going to survive is if their children look after them. Because when they're older, they can't farm. They can't do all these things. They've got to be looked after. And the only ones that are going to look after them are their children. And they've got to make sure that enough children survive all these childhood diseases so that there are children to look after them. But if you vaccinate against these childhood diseases, children are not going to die. So there's no need to have this large number of children to ensure that you have living children to look after you in your old age. You can have much fewer children.
Yes, but yes, I see what you're saying, but you're still, when it all shakes out, the children, a large percentage of them are going to die, and you're still going to have, over time, the same population percentage.
You're not.
You're not going to have a shrinkage of the population. You're not going to have a shrinkage of the population.
I don't think you understand the dynamics of populations in a situation where there is disease.
Well, we're going to keep going around and around. We might as well change the subject. I don't see how you're going to get population shrinkage by
people having less children, Tommy. They don't need to have a big family because the child mortality rate drops. You see, the problem is this, that in a family that has 10, 15 children, you can't guarantee that you're going to have that death rate. So some of these big families are going to survive. And this is what causes the population growth.
Yeah, and if you look at healthy countries, they've got lower birth rates because of their health systems.
Yeah.
Look at poorer countries, they've got their higher rates. So there's an easy...
Here, if we want a family of 2 children, we don't have to go and have 6 to ensure that we've got 2 children that we get to the age of 8. We would just have 2 children. Because we know those 2, in all likelihood, will reach the age of 8.
I'm just saying, the parents, okay, let's say that scenario is true. The parents, by the time they're 40, if they have 2 children die, you're still stuck with whatever one's survived. I mean, you're still, by the time they get to be old age, they're going to have, according to your own logic, they're going to have the same number of offspring as before. It just would have taken more successful births to get there. I'm saying when it shakes out, when everything is said and done, each family is going to be, assuming your logic is true, that they plan their family based on the fact that they need the kids to help raise them, which I kind of doubt. But
it's not logic. It's data. It's actual data. We used to have big families. Why do you think we don't have really big families the way we did in the 1980s?
Because we can't afford it. We can't afford it.
And you think
that's your reason? So in the 50s and the 60s, when population density drastically changed in the United States, and the 40s as well, it was simply because of economics. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a lot of people lived on the farm, and so they needed as many hands as possible to help, plow and do all that stuff. So yes, even back then, when the family farm was big in the United States, we did need big families. But now, again, like I said before, which ticked you guys off, we do have a nanny state. We do have a government giving people free money, free food, and so we don't need grandparents, older people don't need their kids. They don't rely on their kids and family as much as they used to because they get the government.
Yeah, so you've just kind of agreed.
You just agreed.
Yeah, you just agreed with my argument.
How?
You're asking how?
Yeah.
What you've just said is because of the social structure that we have. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have your children to provide for you in your old age.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what I'm pointing out is that in those societies in Africa, you do have to ensure that there are going to be children there to provide for you in your old age. Hence, the larger families in an area where disease is rife.
Okay, we're going to go around. I don't understand how helping babies survives shrinks population. We're going to change
this. It's just saying we're trying to give them a better life so they don't have to have this kind of, huge population growth simply to survive.
Well, I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
And what you're making out of it is some sort of conspiracy to kill off half the world population, and then you say you're not a conspiracy theorist. I'm wondering what your definition of conspiracy theorist is when you think that the Bill Gates Foundation has conspired to spread Ebola or other diseases by infecting people with injections to kill off half the planet.
I said that.
I don't know what you're arguing about then.
I said a couple times.
Why Bill Gates? Why mention the money? Why mention all of this stuff?
I was mentioning the position that some people have. I'm not so sure that someone could be that evil. I would hope and pray that's not the case. And I'm not totally convinced that this is for sure a purposeful infection of everybody, but I'm just saying, looking at it from afar, I could see why someone might take that position.
Can't you see in this function?
And you've successfully deviated the conversation.
There were two variables in this function: the birth rate and the death rate, and of course both are important. You get that, and that it's not just the death rate you have to look at. You also have to look at the birth rate and how a more affluent society has a lower death rate. Sorry, a lower birth rate, and the fact the lower birth rate is more important than the lower death rate. These two things don't cancel each other out exactly. I mean, and we know that this is the case.
Yeah, but with vaccines, you're essentially having a higher birth rate in essence.
I mean, okay, it's not just vaccines. There are lots of things that feed this. One of the main things is of course contraception. In countries that are wealthier, you tend to have better education regarding things like contraception, and of course, that reduces the birth rate for obvious reasons. But in general, and this is not this is not a particularly simplistic thing, but in general, the wealthier the country, the lower the birth rate, and there's lots of factors that feed into this. One of which is vaccination, and of course, and the birth rate turns out to be more important than the death rate. I mean, the death rate is eventually going to become constant because everyone dies in the end. But you could theoretically get the birth rate down much lower.
Of course, just to throw something into the mix is that's one of the things that for lack of a better word, the alternative community has been screaming for decades, is that these vaccines, all these jabs, are actually causing a reduction of fertility, and that's why you have so many couples nowadays that, for whatever reason, they get together, get married, and they're not fertile. They can't have kids, and so that's what a lot of people are saying, that these jabs, which are full of chemicals and metals and all this stuff,
the fertility is higher in developed countries, mostly because there's not a load of malnourishment like there is.
But it is shrinking. That's the thing here recently in the last
couple decades. What?
It's shrinking.
Fertility is getting...
I think we've already covered this, that correlation does not necessarily imply causation. Well, we're talking about population dynamics, and there's a
fertility is increasing. What's happening is the population is also aging. So of course older people are less fertile, but fertility is increasing. It's just that we're also aging. So the average age is also increasing as well. And of course older people are less fertile. And I mean, in places like Africa, you would get very young people having children. I mean, we're talking about things like teenage pregnancies, and teenagers are far more fertile than people in their 40s. And whereas in a wealthy country, you tend to get people in their late 20s or early 30s. That tends to be the age, rather than teenagers doing it.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Better opportunities in life, and therefore they're not having as many children.
You can see why you don't want teenage pregnancies, can't you? You can see why teenage pregnancy is a bad thing, and why society doesn't. I mean, so I don't. So why are you saying this as if the lack of teenage pregnancies in wealthier countries is a bad thing? I mean, that seems to be the implication.
No, I mean, that's not what I said or implied.
Well, I mean, in which case, then you should be able to understand that because people are waiting longer as they get older before they have children, that the fertility.
That may be true. That may be true. But what is that? What I'm asking you though, what do you think is the reason for that? Because their biology is there, just like it was back in their 20s, but for whatever reason, in the 30s or late 30s, they're not able to get pregnant.
But as you get older, you become less fertile.
Yeah, I can also answer that as well.
But why?
I've answered this before.
Are you asking why you get less fertile when you get older?
Yes.
Yes, and why? Yes.
Tommy, I answered this in, I think, 2 previous Hangouts with you, and you're still asking the same question.
I've never asked that.
Yes.
No,
well, I'm going to give you the same answer that I gave.
I'll give you a quarter if you can find it.
One of the problems is that we have an awful lot more chemical compounds in our environment, okay?
Okay, I agree with that.
I worked with xenoestrogens. Now these are compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, phthalates, plasticizers, and they just so happen to have a similar shape to estrogen. So when they get into your system, they can actually bind to your estrogen receptors and cause an effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the effects that I was seeing were that male fish would produce egg yolk protein. Now, male fish don't usually produce egg yolk protein because male fish don't produce eggs.
Right.
We could expose male fish to these compounds and then dissect the testes and find fully developed eggs inside their testes. None of these compounds are in vaccines. None of them.
Well, hang on, but there could be
in compounds that line. They used to be found in compounds that line soup cans, in the plastic containers of milk. It used to be in cling film. And if you wrapped fatty food in cling film, these compounds leached into your food. Again, nothing to do with vaccination. Nothing.
You could have vaccination that has similar chemicals and metals, just like inside the soup can, that have the same reaction. How do you know? Have you tested it? Have you tested that? Have you tested all the compounds and all the metals in these vaccinations to see that they don't create the same problem?
Tommy,
I'm saying it's possible.
Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Do you know what that is?
No, I'm just asking a question though. How do you know that the same?
I'm just telling you, it's not a metal. These are pretty complex organic compounds, and they come from industry. Now, they are not in vaccines.
But there are lots of toxins in vaccines. They're very highly toxic. So I'm just saying the toxins in vaccines could cause them. In fact, like, let's just take.
Wait, are you a doctor? Do you know?
Hang on. No, I do read about
Are you? Did you?
No, I read about this stuff all the time.
Where did you hear this then? Did you hear this from a peer-reviewed paper, or did you hear it from some bullshit site? I want to know.
I can tell you.
You make a claim that vaccines are highly toxic. I want to know where you heard this from.
Yeah.
Would you admit that, for example, that mercury?
I want to know where you heard that from. I don't care.
Give us your source, man.
I want the source.
Let me say, there is no mercury in vaccines these days, Tommy.
Oh, that's not true. There's mercury in flu shots. There's mercury in the MMR.
No, removed. Removed, Tommy. You're out of date. Removed.
Okay, I know it's in the flu shot, and I know it is in some of the vaccines.
How do you know? How do you know?
Give me your sources. Remember, Tommy, you're talking to a microbiologist here. Give me your sources.
Okay, just give me a minute.
Maybe
Well,
also
Tommy,
give the source
when
for
it comes
the lower fertility.
when it comes to xenoestrogens or whatever, well, don't rely on your food absorption anyway.
Well, you guys have heard,
Anytime,
the correlation between mercury. Birds that live in streams that are loaded with mercury have a tendency to start acting gay, start being confused, and not having offspring. Have you seen that?
Well, yeah, but she's not. She's asking you whether there's mercury in vaccines, not whether it's in the water. We know that there is mercury in fish. The World Health Organization gives advice about mercury content.
There's mercury in thermometers. Does that mean there's mercury in vaccines too?
Jeez.
There's mercury in mercury detonators, and these are dangerous. Does that mean they're putting it in vaccines?
So, Fiona, is your position that there is no mercury in any vaccine? Thermosol?
There may be the odd vaccine that contains it because there isn't a suitable alternative. But the vast majority of them don't. And one thing I would point out is that the compound thimerosal, you know why it was included? It's a preservative.
Right.
You have to preserve the antigenic quality of the vaccine. Otherwise, it doesn't work. If you let the actual antigens degrade in the vaccine, then it's no longer a vaccine. You have to preserve it. Now, they've been taking mercury out of vaccines, even although there is no evidence that the tiny, tiny dose causes any effect whatsoever. And this whole hoo-ha began with Andrew Wakefield and the MMR vaccine. And Andrew Wakefield's work has been completely and utterly debunked.
He's a proven fraud.
Yes.
He's not even allowed to practice medicine anymore.
And in fact, in September, he lost his court case in Texas. And the appeal was rejected as well. Andrew Wakefield did what you accuse scientists of doing. He deliberately fabricated his data to support this idea that MMR caused autism, so that he could then sell the single measles vaccine that he had applied for a patent for. He applied for the patent 6 months before he published his results about the MMR. Now, how did he know that he was going to be saying this about, oh, you must get a single measles vaccine before he had his data? He didn't. He fabricated his data.
Yeah, I know nothing about that case.
Yeah, obviously not.
Maybe you should.
No, I don't. I mean, I've heard of him. I just don't know the details of it.
Well, maybe you should before you start using, his
exactly.
crap as sources. Maybe
one of the other things
I haven't used any source yet. Have you heard about the guy on the CDC who admitted to deliberately withholding information at the CDC that actually the MMR vaccine does in fact cause an increase in the autism rate in black babies? Did you hear that? I'm sure you have recently.
Dr.
Thompson.
The problem here.
Dr.
Andrew Wakefield decided there was a syndrome yeah, I know you're smirking, Tommy, but you're going to listen to me. Andrew Wakefield decided he was going to discover a new syndrome which linked bowel disease and autism. He recruited for his study 12 children who were autistic and who had bowel disease. Okay? So right there, because it was a selected group of children, they all have it. He would have been as well, instead of saying how many of these 12 had the MMR vaccine, and then saying, oh, the vaccine caused it, he would have got an even better correlation if he'd asked how many drank milk as babies. Because you see, in those 12 children, one child had actually been given the single measles vaccine, but they were still recorded as being damaged by the MMR vaccine. Another child hadn't been given either the single measles vaccine or the MMR. They were still recorded as the symptoms beginning after they were given the MMR. So there's 2 children in the study that he is claiming became, that the symptoms began not long after the MMR vaccine, and they had never been given the vaccine. On top of that, the medical records of the children have shown that there are certain answers about symptoms where the symptoms were not present, and those answers were changed to say the symptoms were present, but they weren't. It was actually changed deliberately. On top of that, he told the parents he was taking the children to surgery, and the parents seriously thought he was attempting to treat their bowel disease. He wasn't. He was getting biopsy tissue for his work. And I know of at least one case where he so badly perforated the bowel of this child that the child almost died of peritonitis and septicemia. Now, that he did this without informed parental consent. Every single author in his paper has retracted the claim. Every one of them. And on top of that, he developed a kit for parents to use that would diagnose this imaginary syndrome of autistic bowel disease. And he applied for a patent for this kit. And he estimated in his patent application that he would make $41 million in the first year from sales of this kit. For a disease that he had invented by fabricating his data. Now, on the basis of this man's work, this is where the whole vaccine scare has come from.
Let me just read this quote from Dr. Thompson here. This is recently he's a CDC doctor. He says, "I regret that my co-authors and I omitted statistically significant information in 2004 article published in the Journal of Pediatrics. The omitted data suggested that African American males who received the MMR vaccine before age 36 months were at increased risk for autism." So if there's absolutely no connection, what is all this about? And here's the other issue. It's not just the MMR. It's all of them combined. It's all these vaccines put together. You know, back when I was young, back in the 70s when I got vaccines, it was, you know, the average person would get 5 or 6 vaccines. And now it's like dozens.
Excuse me, on Snopes.com, you'll find that quote. The title is "Fraud at the CDC Uncovered, 340% Increased Risk of Autism Hidden from Public." I'll include the link. The story is false.
Yeah,
there you go.
False. Please.
Yeah, and also, can I go back to something else that is really important here? Tommy's given us a list of all these dangerous things in vaccines. Right, let me read them out. Gelatin. You get that in sweeties.
So?
Egg protein. Eat a couple of eggs. And the real killer here, no, the really, really dangerous one.
Formaldehyde.
No. Sodium chloride. Yeah, sodium chloride. Please don't end the comment because I'm scrolling back up this to find this. Sodium chloride raises blood pressure and inhibits muscle contraction and growth. And yet it's essential for life, Tommy. The list that you've put down the side here, showing all the dangers. If you didn't have sodium chloride in your body, you would be dead.
Okay, fine. But the thing is, all these vaccines and the numbers that they're getting, these along with other chemicals, with a developing baby who's just born or is very young, can have a negative effect on their brain. And so you declined to mention the formaldehyde and the possible mercury and the other things that are.
Yeah, I would actually just like to comment on that real quick.
I'm sorry, this is tinfoil hat again.
I'm just reading up on it. In the UK, the MMR vaccine was the subject of controversy after publication of that paper that Andrew Whitfield reported in 1998, reporting of a study of 12 children who had bowel symptoms along with autism and other disorders. However, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Institute of Medicine, and the National Academy of Sciences, as well as several other health services, have concluded that there is no evidence linking the MMR vaccine and vaccination. The research was declared fraudulent by the British Medical Journal. So what we are dealing with is conspiracy.
Yeah,
it's coming straight from the CDC doctor's mouth. There's no conspiracy.
Well, again, I just included the link. If you read
give me the quote that says that it's the whole thing.
It's a rather lengthy document.
What does it say that makes you think that it was false? Because I was reading through it, and I see nothing that said it was made up.
Read the entire thing.
No. Just tell me, because you couldn't have read it that fast to come to the conclusion that the whole thing was made up.
I can see it. I can see it, but it's got a rather you have to read above
just tell me what it says to make you think the whole thing was made up.
Tommy,
yes.
The paper trail that was followed by a journalist called Brian Deere shows exactly how this whole scam was fabricated. He uncovered all of this. He found the documents. He found the patent applications from Andrew Wakefield.
No, I'm talking about Dr. Thompson. I'm not talking about Wakefield.
Dr. Thompson. So basically, you picked up something that isn't true.
On what basis?
We have now got to prove that it isn't true. Otherwise, it's true. This is one of your problems. I mean, you said no, Tommy. This is
it's from the horse's mouth.
Tommy, you've just said the flu shot contains thimerosal.
Mm-hmm.
The flu shot is available in two versions, one containing it and one without, and you can choose.
Yeah, and I'm sure they give everybody that option right there and say, do you want the one with mercury or the one without mercury? I'm sure that goes on.
It's been removed from all childhood vaccines.
Would you please support that with a link? I'd like to see that.
It's a link in the side chat.
I have sent multiple links about that in the chat. Just
that's the one that I'm looking at. It's cdc.gov, vaccine safety, concerns thimerosal. That one.
Why would they remove something that's not harmful? You guys' position is that it's not harmful.
Because of all of this scaremongering by people like...
Oh, well, that's ridiculous. If there's something that's truly not harmful, then there's no reason to keep using it if it serves a valuable purpose.
No.
Actually,
I'm sorry, Tommy, did you not? No, Tommy, it's not even funny, this. Children are dying because of this scaremongering. Children are dying of measles because of this scaremongering.
Just
so
millions
it's not funny. Don't sit and snicker.
Look how many autistic kids there are.
How about?
Well, I mean,
what's causing the autism? What's causing the autism? It's not vaccinations.
Just brutal. This is ridiculous.
What's causing autism?
Tommy commented underneath somebody else's video that he only says things because he knows it gets people annoyed and he likes doing that.
No, I did not say that. I did not say that's the only reason. I said I do that to rile people up, for sure, but I like a lively conversation.
There you are, self-confessed troll.
No, I'm not.
The
question is, what causes autism? What causes autism?
Quantum overlord. I think you're going to have to do something here.
Well, you did just admit you're a troll. The definition of troll is promoting antagonism, an antagonistic tool for the people. Anyway, I've had a look. I had a look for this Dr. Thompson thing. It's not credible. The original paper, tiny sample size. The paper was published in a journal that wasn't even very well peer reviewed. None of this is credible. It's just as bad as the Andy Wakefield thing.
It's a quote from the doctor who was on the actual study.
He admitted
data.
The study itself was terrible. The study itself had a tiny sample size. It wasn't peer reviewed.
He omitted data.
It was appalling. It doesn't matter.
A quote means nothing, Tommy. A quote means nothing.
He admitted lying to cover up the fact that there is, in fact, a link between black kids getting and MMR. I just read it to you.
Didn't I, being the only black guy in this room, demonstrate that that's a bunch of crap right there?
How? You demonstrated nothing.
I actually did. You can send in the link, dude. Seriously.
How does that demonstrate it? How does that demonstrate that it's a lower bowl? Just tell us. Use your brain. Don't make me go on a search.
I just read it up. I mean, did you not listen while you're in your mind about how science is evil, apparently?
I heard no explanation of how it's bull. He made the statement. The quote is there. He's on video saying basically the same thing. He was on the actual study that is in question, and he admits to admitting that he and his colleagues omitted data. I don't know what else you guys want.
So,
okay, I think we can move on. This is like freaking talking. We're literally beating a dead horse here.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jenny McCarthy might have more influence than random Google plus YouTube people on the on this network here. And if we're gonna point a finger at somebody, probably Jenny McCarthy, not Tommy Hall.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's because the UK dealt with all of this nonsense when it first surfaced. It first surfaced in 1998, and recently, a few months back, I interviewed Brian Deere, the Sunday Times journalist, about his investigation into the MMR scandal. But this began in 1998, and the UK dealt with it. And we had everybody looking at it to see if his results could be supported. And this is before we knew about the fabrication. This is before the paper trail had been uncovered.
Fiona?
And we came to the conclusion, everybody came to the conclusion, that there was absolutely no link. The paper itself, I read the paper when it came out, and within 10 minutes, I could see that there is no way that his claims could hold any water at all. Not with only 12 children selected for having the disease. It doesn't work. But not only that, they looked at studies from other countries that didn't actually use the MMR vaccine, and their autism rates were the same as the countries that did use it.
Fiona, can I ask you a question?
Go on.
You're a doctor. Yes, you're a doctor. Okay, so there is a lot of fear about vaccines, correct?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people who believe that there is a correlation. Why would the medical, aka scientific community, not test the whole regimen of vaccines on an actual animal to see how? Oh, really? The whole regimen, just like our babies get today.
Vaccines cannot. If you actually look. If you
I've seen, they test individual, like they tested the MMR to see if that would create a problem.
Oh, you want all at once, you mean?
No, I'm saying to give monkeys, for example, the whole regimen or the whole accumulation of vaccines, just like humans might get, just to see how the monkeys turned out over a period of generations, if they started showing autism or autistic sort of signs. As opposed to just testing one particular vaccine, I'm looking to test the whole gamut.
Wait a minute, Tommy, don't you believe that monkeys and humans are different kinds? How would that prove anything to you?
You could use a pig. I'm saying you could use any mammal.
How would that prove anything to you?
If they showed autistic symptoms,
you've got a huge study group. You've got a huge study group of humans.
But we don't know what causes autism. It's a big question mark.
We see no correlation between vaccines and autism.
But what would you need to see? Because they have never tested the whole.
You would need to see a correlation.
By testing it, they won't test it. That's the whole point. They won't test it.
Why won't they test it? That's the why.
They won't.
Why won't they?
Because they're scared.
Tommy, how many children have been given the full range of vaccines? How many?
I don't know.
Tommy, what are they scared of? They don't want to test it.
That's going to count as basically what you're saying we should look at. We've looked at it. And all these children have been given the vaccines, and there is no correlation.
They haven't tested. How can you say that? They've never tested the whole gamut of vaccinations, the whole schedule.
Tommy, inadvertently, every child on the planet that gets vaccinated is counted as a test subject in your world.
And we keep getting more autism, and they keep giving us more vaccinations, more and more and more numbers of vaccinations, and the autism is spiraling out of control.
Please.
There is no correlation between vaccination and autism. End of story.
No, you have to prove it to me by way of science, by testing it, repeating it. They've never tested it. The scientific community is a bunch of chickens.
Tommy, this science has been known about for a long time, and if you're so interested, go and find out about it. It's not my job to sit and go through this vaccine nonsense with you yet again. I've been through it so many times with you, and you've still never looked at a single reference I've given you, which is why I'm not bothering putting references in the side chat.
If you give me a reference to test the whole schedule of vaccinations, I'd be glad to look at it.
Tommy, I have given you, in Hangout after Hangout, references in the side chat, to which you've responded. I'm not going to read it.
Listen to me,
Tell
Fiona.
me about it.
A controlled test would rule out other things, such as, you know, some kids may have mothers who smoke, and that may cause autism. Who knows? But I'm saying if you have a controlled experiment on a mammal, such as a monkey or a chimp or a pig, and you let them breed over a few generations, you can by way of controlled experiment, you can remove all those other factors that might otherwise cause autism. You can isolate. You can isolate the jabs.
Tommy, two things. If you're complaining about the lack of randomised controlled trials, firstly there are some, and secondly, look at smoking. There've been very few randomised controlled trials in smoking. Do you think that smoking causes cancer? Because if by this logic you could not say there was a link between smoking and lung cancer, because for exactly the same reason there have not been that many high-quality randomised controlled trials. So therefore, should we go under the assumption that smoking doesn't cause lung cancer and just say you can smoke if you want? No, presumably not. Anyway, we're getting close to finishing now, but you know.
Yeah.
Right.
So Tommy's done what Tommy does best.
If anyone's got any last points, then that's fine. But we're going to be closing up basically now.
I think on the smoking thing.
I would like to.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Just publicly offer to, well, maybe work through some of the math of like, you know, birth death rates and things like that. I mean, in queuing theory, it's kind of a standard topic. So, I worked at a Klein Rock for my undergrad or whatever, but I'm sure I can dig up references to work out of for any new sessions we do. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
I may be out of turn here, but I think on the smoking thing, strictly speaking, smoking is a strong contributing factor, but I don't know that it's generally been said to cause cancer. I don't know what the distinction is, but I think there is some kind of a fine line there.
It does. It's the mutagenic effect of the combustion products and the tars.
Yeah, I'm referring to a friend of mine who worked for the American Cancer Society, who years ago told me that it's really wrong to say that it, strictly speaking, that it causes lung cancer, even though it's a strong contributing factor or there's a strong correlation. So I think there is maybe some kind of nuance to claiming that with regards to cancer. But again, that's like 20 years old that I'm referring to, so maybe this has been maybe dealt with a little more.
I think even though there aren't that many randomized control trials in it, the body of evidence that smoking causes cancer is just so huge.
Yeah. Well, cancer, emphysema. My father was a 5-pack-a-day smoker for many years, and he had emphysema, but he did not have lung cancer. He died of a completely unrelated cancer.
It's because it causes DNA damage, and of course the DNA that's damaged is random. So it increases your chances of getting cancer, but it's not going to directly cause it.
Right. Yeah,
because you don't know where those mutations are going to be.
Claiming something as being a cause is pretty high. Maybe Fiona, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case. But
yeah, I mean, we tend to go with the smoking causes cancer because the correlation is so close, and because we know the nature of the chemicals within what is inhaled. We're able to check them to see how mutagenic they are with very easy tests using bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, my grandfather was similarly a heavy smoker, and he did die of lung cancer, but different heredity, different. This is on my another side of the family, so they weren't related. But there was no not a lot of cancer on my father's side of the family, and he didn't die of cancer.
Well, Jeff, maybe he was a different kind than your father.
There's actually a very interesting effect. If you drink and smoke, there is a correlation between that and an increase of mouth and throat cancer. And that seems to be because the alcohol induces an alternative cytochrome P450, which also acts on some of the components in cigarette smoke, but it takes them down a different reaction path, and it causes a different metabolites to be formed.
Sure.
And so you end up getting this correlation between mouth and throat cancer and alcohol and smoking together.
Right.
So you see that much more commonly in people who smoke and drink, whereas those who only smoke.
My father was a heavy drinker as well. So,
yeah.
And in fact,
because there's an interplay of so many different things.
In fact, it's kind of interesting to me since you brought it up. When he was diagnosed in the mid-'90s with having emphysema, he was told that he would have to obviously quit smoking, and when he quit smoking, he decided that he would also quit drinking because to him they were the same thing. And so it's that's anecdotal, but to me it suggested the possibility that there's really a strong correlation between the two, according to with certain people.
Yeah. But that correlation is certainly not seen with vaccines and autism. It just isn't.
Right.
And the people who are promoting this idea.
So what do you think it is, Fiona? If it's not vaccines, what do you think it is?
Well, first of all, the refinement technique of basically claiming that somebody is autistic has changed over the years, whereas it was a lot less common to diagnose somebody because the symptoms were not recognized in decades before. They've been refined very, very much over the last 20 or so years, so that a lot more people are now diagnosed as autistic. It's more of a case we just didn't know, whereas now we have a lot more information and we diagnose it a lot quicker and a lot more in a lot more refined way. And you can even actually say that there's sometimes a case of overdiagnosing in some cases, but I'm not sure I would agree with that. But the case has been made. But it's just far more common to even just look for it now, whereas before you weren't even looking for it in most cases.
Right. I don't really have a dog in this fight either way, but I think I think the way that we diagnose things certainly changes results, and where somebody may have been just awkward or nerdy a few decades ago, now we have a medical term to diagnose them. But I also I think there is concern about the number of immunizations that are administered all at the same time and how they interact with each other. So I'm not entirely I wouldn't jump to one camp or the other. There was the concern about I guess it was reported a few months ago about how some of this evidence was fudged. I think Tommy alluded to that. So I mean, I'm open-minded on it. I don't have a stake in it. I don't think it's a Christian versus atheist. I don't think it's a Christian versus atheist issue. It's an empirical question.
Right. Yeah, you got to wonder why they would fudge. What would motivate them to fudge? I mean, you would think the CDC, the people investigating this, would want to help the public. Why?
It's a conspiracy, dude. The aliens.
No, it's not a conspiracy.
No, it's not.
It is. Yeah, I mean, the aliens are coming, Tommy.
Well, you can dismiss conspiracy is like a word that's used to dismiss everything.
I'll tell you what, Tommy.
Conspiracy is when two or more people do something in secret, and that happens in every day of our personal and our political lives. So that's nothing extraordinary. But just to finish up, I'm almost done. If I didn't just forget what I was about to say. Okay, go ahead. I forgot what I was going to say.
Tommy, tell me if this one sounds right. Is it a satanic Muslim atheist plot hatched by the Obama administration?
Communists, you forgot that. Yeah.
Oh, communists too. Yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, you're all in it together.
We are.
You're out to kill the Christians and the blacks.
We are.
Yeah.
Well, I think I probably would agree with Tommy.
Yeah, except
science is heavily politicized, and to get grants and stuff like that, you have to. Some hypotheses have a little more weight than others in the U.S. I'm not sure about how that works elsewhere in the world, but for example, if you have research that strongly suggests global warming or things that are politically popular, you will tend to get more research than if you have some kind of alternate theory.
Let's not open that can of worms.
We'll get more grants for that, and that's just kind of, unfortunately, it's heavily politicized.
Yeah,
so that's part of the problem. And
you do have a point. There is some politicization in it, and there is some corruption in big pharma. I admit that. But out of all in the academic community, and there have been studies on this, the least corrupt of everything is the journal system, the peer-reviewed journal system. There is corruption in the peer-reviewed journal system, but it's minor compared to everywhere else. So if you want to point at the corruption that exists in the journal system and then use it as evidence that the studies are being falsified, which there are cases of this happening, then you have to apply the same scrutiny for all these outlandish amateur-type theories, where basically all of them.
I totally agree, but I think it's reasonable to lower to have the bar in a place where, because it is politicized to the extent that it is, that one should be suspicious about really claims, especially apocalyptic claims or claims that are really dramatic. One should be very suspicious about them, especially in light of how politicized science is, because even though even though the method itself may be intact, the research dollars and and what's being done is really only to support those particular theories. So they may be very sound in as far as all the claims add up to that particular conclusion, but the competing hypotheses are not getting the same airing, and I think that's cause for
you can test for publication bias using something called a forest plot. So there are statistical means that you can test for this sort of thing. It's not as if only positive studies are being published just by chance, the ones that positive are being published and the ones that are negative are being shelved. You can test for this.
But we've seen ClimateGate where it's been made clear, for example, that some of the data was fudged. That doesn't mean it's wrong or anything like that, but it's cause for skepticism, and we should always be skeptical of any kind of groupthink, no matter how nicely it's presented.
That's why we have the peer review system, in order to avoid that.
The peer review system is marvelous, but again, competing theories are not getting the same kind of airing. Because
the reason climate change denialism isn't getting the same kind of thing is because it's just wrong. I mean, that's
And it's also being presented as a package deal. So it's like we're told that everybody believes, and I don't mean to change the subject to climate change, but I'm more familiar with this argument than I am the vaccination one. But under climate change, there's actually at least 4 or 5 different major propositions that are offered as part of it. So there is, well, is there climate change? There's that issue. Then is it anthropomorphic? And is it something we can do anything about it if it is anthropomorphic? There's this kind of package deal. And yes, most scientists agree on one of those points, but they're counted sort of as like this is just a slam dunk. Everybody agrees on everything, which most everybody does not agree on all the points of the climate change issue. They agree on one or more. There's change. There's warming. There's this. There's that. Can we do anything about it? Is it anthropomorphic and all that, or anthrocentric, or whatever the word is? I'm sorry, I can't remember. But anyway, so you have this package deal, and it's presented to you all at once. And if you reject any of those points, you're called a denier. Well, that's kind of a snarl word, and it's reasonable to be skeptical about really extraordinary claims about tidal waves. Oh, there's also the issue of is warming a bad thing? Mankind began towards the equator. We don't really do well in the cold unless we have fossil fuels to burn or whatever it is to keep us warm. That's really what enables us to move north. So if our sphere where we can live and survive actually expands because of global warming, is that even a bad thing? So there's that aspect of it as well. So to kind of get into this groupthink sort of herd mentality about this packaged panoply of ideas that are all kind of disparate, and some are stronger cases than others. I think that's cause for skepticism, and probably in the case of vaccinations, a topic with which I'm less familiar, it's probably reasonable as well. And I say that as an atheist and an advocate of critical thinking, but admittedly a lay person.
Do Nadia or Fiona want to go?
My points are quick. I might suggest maybe I don't know. Think maybe more carefully about what makes a claim extraordinary. Like, is it these nebulous ideas about politics, or is it like
right.
economic or monetary benefits? And the other part is when actually I'll just send it on from there. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask Tommy something about one of these dangerous chemicals. You will actually find it in vaccines.
There was a report within the past few weeks that said, well, we do have global warming, but there's really nothing we can do about it. And if that's the case, then we shouldn't shut down our economy, and we shouldn't make people needlessly suffer if there's nothing we can do about it.
We don't need to go. I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is just going to go on for hours. And
oh no, you can cut me off.
I mean, I would like to do a hangout on it, because this is something that I've looked into a hell of a lot. To summarise, basically the claims of the climate change skeptic, and the skeptic is in inverted commas, is it's based on a load of misconceptions about climate change and global warming. I mean, the consensus is that climate change, global warming is happening, and it's bad. And there's loads. I mean, you could. This subject is far less nuanced than something like vaccines. We know that global warming is happening. We know people are causing it, and we know that it's a bad thing.
But we don't necessarily know that it's just a cyclical thing that happens.
No, we've
had a leveling off in the last 18 years.
No. We do know this. We do. No. We do know this. The so-called climate change pause is due to a variety of factors. One, multi-decadal Pacific oscillations, which are absorbing heat into the upper Pacific. The upper Pacific Ocean has seen the greatest rate of warming in the last 100 years. The Pacific Ocean is absorbing heat. Two, latent heat of ice, melting ice caps, including land ice in Greenland, sea ice in the Arctic, and land ice in western Antarctica, is of course absorbing heat. If ice is absorbing heat, then it cannot go into increasing the air temperature. Thirdly, these natural cycles, including the Mikhov cycles, are due to orbital eccentricity, which are not relevant in here. These are long-wave cycles. The thing about climate change recently, and things like the pause, is that the rate of heat increase in the Earth system is higher than it has ever has been before, and that is the concern, not these sort of long-wave cycles.
These are all multiple claims, and I'm not qualified to address them. I will totally admit it, and I don't know that I will be joining you if we're going to be talking about these particular claims, because I can't really address them, but this issue seems to have problems with falsifiability. So if things aren't warming, there's an explanation, and if they are warming, there is the same conclusion, and that seems to be a problem with a scientific hypothesis that it has to be falsifiable, or otherwise. And then there's a question. Well, maybe these things are happening. Maybe there is warming. Is it such a bad thing? Was it such a bad thing when Greenland was green and there was agriculture in that area? So
yeah, but I mean, when you take into account all some of the factors, it's a bad thing. And even if you don't buy the whole thing about the reason why the heat is not going into the air, it's actually going into the oceans. Even if you don't buy that, there has not been a pause. The rate of warming has just been reduced over the last 10 years. You could even suggest that there's some statistical element to it. It's not credible to suggest that man is not causing climate change. Anyway, I'm going to be sorry. I would love to do a hangout on this. If you want to bring these questions in in 2 weeks' time.
I would just be a foil. I'm not a scientist, so. But
I mean,
I'm bringing up my objections as an intelligent layperson, as an advocate of critical thinking.
But you might have good questions, even though.
I would questions.
No, you don't have any questions. You're just preaching Ayn Rand. But anyway.
I would definitely appreciate that.
I would be a foil.
We can do this in 2 weeks' time, and I'm sorry I'm being a little bit snippy.
Oh yeah, invite me, please. I'll join you and I'll ask questions.
But the only reason I'm being a bit snippy is because I really want to end this, and I realise that I'm pissing a lot of people off by not ending this. So if you want to do this in 2 weeks' time, we can do climate change tomorrow. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm getting a little bit. But anyway,
I didn't mean to necessarily derail the conversation or go in this direction, but I think we should be skeptical of institutionalized of institutionalized sort of dogma that comes out of certain things that are research oriented, because that's heavily subsidized, it's heavily politicized, and that was really my only point.
Okay. Anyway, we really need to end now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I've dominated this too much. I know Nathaniel wants me to dominate it more, but anyway, it's not a formal thing. Feel free to interrupt anyone at any time. It wasn't
invite me. I will join you. I don't have any.
I guess anyway. Fiona.
The rest of the evening, but
Fiona clearly wants to finish off, so I'll just let Fiona have the last word.
Yeah, I had a question for Tommy, but he's gone now. And it was about all these dangerous things that are in vaccines. And there's one of the things that's in the vaccine. Now, we know for a fact that this substance is dangerous in that 100% of those people who have had prolonged exposure to it, to their lungs, it's specifically the lungs, 100% of those people have died directly from exposure of their lungs to this compound. It's not only found in vaccines, it's in multiple things. And I wanted to know if Tommy wanted it banned. It can go under the name of dihydrogen monoxide. Would you want that banned?
I got it. I got it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's ban the hydrogen.
Yeah, that's on par with his other hazardous things in vaccine, like sodium chloride, gelatin, and egg protein.
Or carbon dioxide.
Yes. Yep. And so this is the problem. You can find a hazard with anything in excess.
Yeah, it's about moderation.
It's the dosage, the poison.
The dosage, yes.
Yeah. So for him to actually list sodium chloride as a dangerous component of vaccines is so much marsh gas.
Yeah, if you eat a kilo of it, maybe.
Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to ask him about dihydrogen monoxide, because there's not just a correlation there. 100% of people with prolonged exposure of their lungs to this have died.
It's good to end on a joke. And we'll do this. I'll do this again in 2 weeks' time. Thanks everyone for coming.
And Quantum, if I just get an invite to it, I'm not sure that you want me to be in on it. In particular, I'll try to join you. But if you want me to be in on something, just give me a heads up, like a personal.
Anyone that I mean, you feel free to join. I mean, the format
okay, that's fine.
And anyone else that wants to join, please add this version of me to your.
But I'm probably more of a scientific skeptic than.
I don't know what we'll be doing in 2 weeks' time anyway, so we'll see how it pans out. No, thanks everyone for coming.
We may